In the winter of 1626, within the stone walls of the royal palace in Stockholm, a child was born who would shock the world before she even drew her first breath. When the infant was delivered, the midwives and attendants shouted with joy that a prince had been born. The baby was covered in hair, possessed a deep, strong voice, and appeared to be the male heir King Gustavus Adolphus so desperately needed. But as the nurses began to wash the newborn, the truth emerged. The prince was a girl.
This was Christina of Sweden, a woman born into a man's destiny, who would eventually spend her life tearing down every expectation of her gender, her religion, and her crown. She was a queen who preferred the company of philosophers to suitors, who wore men's boots instead of silk slippers, and who would ultimately commit the most unthinkable act in 17th century politics. She walked away from the throne at the height of her power.
To understand Christina, you must understand the shadow cast by her father. Gustavus Adolphus, known as the Lion of the North, was one of the greatest military commanders in history. He transformed Sweden from a backwater Baltic state into a European superpower. When it became clear that Christina would be his only surviving child, he did something revolutionary. He ordered that she be educated exactly like a prince.
While other royal girls were being taught needlework and courtly etiquette, Christina was mastering 6 languages, studying political science, and learning the art of war. She spent her days hunting, riding horses for 10 hours at a time, and debating theology with the most learned men in the kingdom. She was a scholar in a warrior's court. But tragedy struck early. When Christina was only 6 years old, her father was killed at the Battle of Lutzen.
Suddenly, this small girl was no longer just a princess. She was the king of Sweden. The law actually designated her as king, not queen regnant, to emphasize her absolute authority. She was placed under the guardianship of the brilliant Chancellor Axel Oxenstierna, the man who had been her father's right hand. For years, the kingdom was run by a regency council, but Christina was watching, learning, and growing increasingly restless.
She hated the traditional role of a woman. She refused to dress in the heavy, restrictive gowns of the era, often opting for men's jackets and simple cravats. Her hair was frequently uncombed, and she showed a blatant disregard for her physical appearance. What mattered to Christina was the mind. She famously slept only 3 or 4 hours a night, spending the rest of her time reading.
When she finally took full control of the government at the age of 18, Europe was exhausted. The 30 Years' War had been raging for decades, turning the continent into a graveyard. While her generals and advisors wanted to press on for more territory and more glory, Christina wanted peace. She was a diplomat of extraordinary skill. Against the wishes of her most powerful counselors, she was instrumental in negotiating the Peace of Westphalia in 1648. This treaty didn't just end the war, it established the modern system of nation-states. Sweden emerged as one of the most powerful nations on Earth, and Christina was the architect of its new standing.
But for Christina, power was not enough. She wanted to turn Stockholm into the Athens of the North. She used the vast wealth of the crown to bring the greatest scientists, artists, and thinkers of Europe to her court. The most famous of these was René Descartes, the father of modern philosophy. She demanded that he tutor her, but her schedule was brutal. She insisted on lessons at 5 o'clock in the morning in a drafty, unheated library during a Swedish winter. Many historians believe the intense cold and the Queen's demanding schedule led to Descartes' early death from pneumonia. Despite her intellectual triumphs, the pressure on the young queen was mounting. She was the last of the House of Vasa. The Swedish parliament, the Riksdag, was obsessed with her marriage. They needed an heir. They presented her with lists of eligible princes, but Christina found the very idea of marriage revolting. She famously stated that she could not bear the thought of being treated like a field to be plowed. She valued her independence above all else, and she knew that a husband would inevitably try to rule her and her kingdom.
Rumors about her private life swirled through the courts of Europe. She had a deep, intimate relationship with her lady-in-waiting, Ebba Spare, whom she called her bedfellow and praised for her beauty.
Whether her inclinations were romantic or simply an expression of her rejection of traditional norms, Christina made it clear she would never marry.
This refusal created a constitutional crisis. If she wouldn't marry, the line of succession would die with her. To solve this, she maneuvered the government into recognizing her cousin, Charles Gustav, as her heir. But there was a deeper conflict brewing in Christina's soul. Sweden was a fiercely Lutheran country, yet Christina had become disillusioned with the strictures of the national church. She had been secretly studying Catholicism, the very religion her father had died fighting against.
By 1654, Christina had reached a breaking point. She was 27 years old, at the peak of her influence, and she was bored with the theater of royalty. In a move that sent shockwaves through every palace in the world, she announced her abdication. The Swedish people were devastated. Her advisors begged her to stay, but Christina was resolute. In a dramatic ceremony at Uppsala Castle, she stripped off her royal robes, took the crown from her head, and stepped down from the throne.
She didn't just leave the palace, she left the country. She dressed in men's clothes, called herself Count Dona, and rode south. When she reached the border, she famously leaped across a stream, shouting that she was finally free.
Her journey to Rome was a public relations nightmare for the Protestant world and a massive victory for the Catholic Church. She publicly converted to Catholicism in Innsbruck, and when she entered Rome, she was treated like a conquering hero. The Pope commissioned Gian Lorenzo Bernini to decorate the city gate for her arrival. She was the most famous woman in the world, a queen who had given up everything for her faith and her freedom.
But Christina was not built for a quiet life of prayer. She settled into the Palazzo Farnese and turned it into a hub of Roman culture. She founded the Academy of Arcadia for philosophy and literature. She collected thousands of rare manuscripts and masterpieces of art, many of which now form the core of the Vatican's collections.
However, her political instincts never left her. She became embroiled in the dark, tangled politics of the papacy and the European powers. In 1657, a scandal erupted that would forever stain her reputation. While staying at the Palace of Fontainebleau in France, she discovered that her master of the horse, Gian Rinaldo Monaldeschi, had been betraying her secrets to her enemies.
Christina did not turn him over to the French authorities. She acted as her own judge, jury, and executioner. She ordered her guards to kill him in the gallery of the palace. As Monaldeschi begged for mercy, the guards stabbed him to death while he wore a coat of chainmail, making the execution long and agonizing. Europe was horrified. Even in exile, Christina viewed herself as a sovereign with the power of life and death. She claimed that because she had never abdicated her divine right, she was still a queen, and her word was law. This event soured her relationship with the French court and made her a controversial figure in Rome. She spent the rest of her life in a perpetual cycle of financial trouble, political maneuvering, and intellectual pursuit. Twice, she attempted to reclaim a crown, first by returning to Sweden after the death of her cousin, and later by trying to get herself elected as the Queen of Poland. Both attempts failed. In her later years, Christina became a fierce protector of the Jewish community in Rome and a vocal opponent of the Pope's more repressive policies. She remained a woman of contradictions, deeply religious but fiercely independent, a lover of art who could be brutally violent, and a monarch who chose to live as a commoner but never let anyone forget her royal blood.
Christina died in 1689 at the age of 62. She requested a simple burial, but the papacy saw her as a symbol of the Church's triumph over the Reformation. She was given a massive, ornate funeral and became one of only a handful of women ever to be buried in the grottos of St. Peter's Basilica beneath the Great Dome of the Vatican.
The mystery of Christina of Sweden remains. Was she a visionary who saw beyond the limitations of her time, or a self-indulgent rebel who abandoned her duty for her own whims? She shattered the gender roles of the 17th century, refusing to be a wife or a mother, choosing instead to be a philosopher king in exile. Her legacy is not found in the lands she conquered, but in the libraries she built,
the peace she brokered, and the defiance she showed to a world that tried to tell her who she was supposed to be.
She was the queen who dared to say no to a crown, proving that the most powerful thing a person can possess is the ownership of their own soul. Subscribe for more untold stories of history.